Thank you for joining the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast with your host, Clayton Craddock.
Welcome to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. My name is Clayton Craddock, and this is your one-stop shop for everything you'll need to know about playing drums for Broadway musicals. This is part 2 of my conversation with Gary Seligson. We left off talking about how he got the job at Aida. We're going to be discussing his experience working on the show Wicked, Tarzan, School of Rock, Billy Elliot, Motown The Musical, and Mrs. Doubtfire. We also talk about how he worked with Elton John and working with an amazing drummer, Phil Collins. How did you get to Wicked after Aida?
So the same guy that was the choreographer on Aida got hired for Wicked. And so one day, Jim Abbott, do you know Jim?
Mm-mm.
You don't know him? He's a good friend of mine. I've done a lot of stuff with Jim. He's a keyboard player. I know him from Cats, so that was way back to then. He and I did we wound up getting dance arranger credit on Aida because we did so much work on that. And Wayne Salento, the choreographer, really loved working with Jim and I. So when Wicked was his next project, he asked us if we would be interested in working on that with him. And at the time, nobody knew what Wicked was going to become at all. It was just another project. So I was like, sure, of course. That was 2002. So we started working on it with him, and there was a lot of work to be done. And at the time, in the 2003 area, Aida had opened in 2000, so it was about 3 years plus into the run. It was kind of winding down a little bit, and Wicked was clearly becoming something incredible. So that's when I decided to leave Aida to do Wicked. It was a lateral move for me to go from one to the other.
Again, was that something that you went out of town for, or you?
What happened with Wicked was we started quietly working with him and his choreographer Wayne and his assistant. It would be Jim Abbott and me and Wayne and Corinne McFadden for weeks, a week here, a week there. They were trying to come up with choreography, and Wayne's and Stephen Schwartz, the composer of Wicked, his instructions to Wayne Salento and Jim Abbott, who became the dance arranger for the show, was that he wanted the music, besides his own music, his own tune, beautiful melodies and songs, he wanted the dance music to sound something otherworldly, like from some other world. So at the time, we were trying everything in the world. We had some loops going, and we were trying all kinds of crazy things, and we spent weeks working on stuff. And what was your question? How did that evolve? Is that what you asked?
Yes, yeah.
So it was weeks of that, and then at some point they did auditions. They put a cast together, and then we did a cast rehearsals where Jim and I were there playing. Actually, Jim was not playing the cast rehearsals. Alex Lackamore was playing. He was a keyboard one player and associate, and we were playing the rehearsals with the cast, and they were grooming the cast to go to do the Out of Town, which was in San Francisco. And Michael Keller, the contractor, told me right away, he's like, look, I can't take you out of town to play drums because in San Francisco, I have to use the local drummer there, and you're not going to get to do the gig. And I said, okay, that's fine. Aida was still happening, so it didn't really matter to me. Great drummer played it there, and his name I can't think of right now, John somebody. He's amazing. I'll come up with it later. Anyway, so I was fine, and so I continued to play Aida, but I knew that Wicked was really something special. The cast is incredible. The music was beautiful. It was so intense. The story is so intense. There's so much of my own stamp in it, in a way. So at one point during the run of Aida, when they were playing Wicked in San Francisco, I flew myself out with JetBlue to San Francisco to watch the show. I was like, this is worth it to me because I needed to find out if I wanted to do the show or not. I had an open invitation to play the show when it came back to New York. So do I leave Aida and play Wicked, or do I hang with Aida? So I went to watch Wicked in San Francisco, and from the moment Glinda comes down in the ball or whatever it is in the beginning of the show, the people around me were like gasping, like they were completely in it from like minute number 2. They were enthralled with the show because it's the prequel to The Wizard of Oz, and everybody knows the backstory. Everybody's fascinated. Kristen Chenoweth is so amazing and funny and witty, and Adina was spellbinding, and the thing is incredible. Joel Grey was amazing. Norbert Lee. So I was like, well, this is going to be a hit. I immediately knew. I was like, okay. So I told them that, yeah, actually, I want to do the show, and that's what happened.
So I talked to Bill Lanham and Matt Vanderin about Wicked. I asked Bill, I was like, why is it so, everyone that I talked to is like, Matt, God, Wicked's so hard to play. And Matt was telling me that the way you described it to him, I think, was Bartok meets Metallica or something like that. It's like it's a combination.
I guess in a way, I mean, with that. Well, I guess I said that at the time. What I meant by that was Bartok being a modern classical composer whose music is very passionate and intense and sometimes difficult rhythmically and harmonically. You have to be on your game to play that and be very precise and play it to the nth degree. There's nothing Broadway showy about that kind of music. And the Metallica aspect, well, some of it gets kind of heavy rock and intense and angsty. And I was playing, some of those songs you have to, because No Good Deed, that song, and some of the others, it's full on rock. I mean, everything I could give to it, it would take. And the drums that I was using in the pit at Wicked was a thin shell 4-ply maple pearl, gorgeous drums. But I remember hitting them so freaking hard and thinking, man, I am topping these shells out. Like, I can't play anything more into it because it's not going to sound musical after that. And I never felt that way with the drum set before. But some of the music in Wicked made me play that intensely. That's my point. So, Wicked is really all over the place. There's the quietest little finger cymbal and triangle things that you want to be so delicate, and it's chamber music-like. You're playing with a pretty flute and oboe maybe and strings in 1 minute, and somebody's crying or emoting. The stakes are very high theatrically, and Bill Brohn's orchestrations in that show are gorgeous. So, and then there's times when you're playing with a lot of brass. It's a big orchestra, 23-piece band, 2 trombones, 2 French horns, 2 trumpets, 4 woodwinds, 3 keyboards, bass, 2 guitars, drums, percussion, and a string quartet. And the way he orchestrated it, he really uses the orchestration. Specific moments call for specific little ensembles, and there's a lot of that going on while the intense emotion's happening on stage. So sometimes I'm like throwing down playing rock, sometimes it's poppy, sometimes I'm playing a brush ballad tenderly, sometimes it's finger cymbals, sometimes it's bombast tom-toms with timpani. There's no tam-tam, but there's some electronic weirdness, there's some weird sounds on a pad. A lot going on.
What do you think it was about that show that made it have such staying power?
Couple things. First of all, most people know the backstory. Most people know the story of Wizard of Oz, and it's something that speaks to them. So here's a thing being presented. It's a twist on the story and big time, and also a prequel. And I think people were immediately, you go into the story realizing, oh wait, I'm kind of interested in this because I remember seeing this as a kid. There's some gorgeous music. The actors, the original actors, Kristen Chenoweth, they were incredible. The costumes are gorgeous. The set is really wild and cool. It kind of has everything. There was a famous line that Joe Mantello, the director, said when we first opened. He said, and I think it was in an interview or maybe said it in the theater and people picked up on it. He said, well, at least, after watching a preview or a tech rehearsal or probably a a run through. He said, well, at least you know where your $150 is going when you watch the show. Meaning that you see this opulence and you're getting this spectacle. Really, it's not, there's nothing casual about it at all. From the costumes to the story, to the performances, to the music, to the blah, blah, blah.
Musicians in general don't leave shows, especially hit Broadway shows, because we're like, all right, I'm going to stay here. At least I got a job. It's solid. Yeah. You took a leap and you left and you did Tarzan.
But that's why I left.
Tell me more.
We were playing Wicked, and then we were about 2.5 years into it. I'd been with the show, basically, I'd done about a year pre-production, maybe in about 2.5 years of the show, sort of. And one day I heard Disney, who I'd worked with, they produced Aida, was producing Tarzan. And somebody told me that they're producing Tarzan. And I said, well, who's playing drums? And I kind of put in for it and was offered the job, basically. And the way, this is a good story, the way I was offered the job was, at first we just, I was very interested, and I was able to do a 29-hour reading of it. So what that was, maybe you've ever done those, where they'd assemble a small cast, and it's Disney, so they did it like with a big budget. So they assembled a small cast, and they had microphones set up on mic stands and a PA in a room at 42nd Street Studios, a rhythm section. And so I was asked to do that because it was a similar, Paul Bogave was a music supervisor, and he was a musical supervisor on Aida. So he allowed me to do this thing. And of course, it's Phil Collins' music. I love Phil Collins. He's definitely a major influence on me. And I jumped at the chance, of course, and I could do it during the day. And I thought, well, if I wind up at the gig, amazing. And if not, it'll be an incredible experience. So I do the 29-hour thing. I hear the demos, and Jim Abbott was involved also. He was going to MD it. And I said, well, how do I go about this? Because Phil Collins' demos were laden with 10 tracks of percussion, basically, for every song. Because it's Tarzan and it's in the jungles, and there's a lot of percussion. Like, how do you want me to do this in the room? And he said, well, just do whatever you can. So I had a drum set, and I had a drum cat, and on the drum cat I had his samples. I put I had access to Phil's samples, so I put up what I thought was important, and somehow no percussionist. Somehow I was able to play the percussion stuff in the top of the tune, and then when it morphs into the drum kit, I play the drum kit. And if I had to keep a tambourine going, or if I had to play some djembe, I was playing a lot. I was like Spider-Man, And it was on V drums, right?
Oh wow!
And Phil Collins was there every hour of that 29 hours. So here's what went down. Here's how lucky I am and how grateful I am. So we're doing this, and I'm a nervous wreck playing drums for Phil Collins. He's in the room here, with 10 people in the cast, if that. 4 other musicians, Phil Collins, a bunch of Disney people, and they're trying to figure this out. There's a little bit of dialogue used as a through line in between Phil's amazing songs. I'm reading my ass off, like on 2 staffs, the percussion, I kind of made it work, so I knew what I was going to play so that it would work. I spent a lot of time on it, making it work. So I had the V-drum kit with the drum cat and probably like 3 or 4 extra pads and a couple of pedals. It was like electronic madness. Doing the best I could. Playing his sequences or a click, I don't remember now. I can't remember. I think we played to his sequences, but I feel like there was very little percussion on the sequences at that point. And Phil was there with his whole rig. He had like a rig of keyboards and his keyboard guy there. It was fascinating. So it was a Monday through Friday thing. On Thursday, I go into the 10 o'clock rehearsal. And Phil's hanging out by the drum set. And I talked to Phil Collins that week, and he was very friendly, very down-to-earth guy. And Phil's by the drums, 10 in the morning, before 10 to 10. And he's hanging out the drum kit. I'm like, okay, he's at the drums. This is wild. And I said, hey, Phil, how are you? And Phil says to me, he goes, Gary, guess what I did last night? I'm like, I don't know, Phil. What'd you do? He said, I went to Wicked. I was like, you saw Wicked last night? It's like, I saw Wicked last night. I said, well, how did you like that? Thinking that he's going to say, it was okay. He was over the moon about it. He loved it. He was in love with Adina. He loved the band. He said, you sounded incredible. I was like, well, man, Phil, really, thank you. But had I known you were there, had I known I were there, I probably would have choked or something. But, he said, you really sounded great. It was so great to hear you in the theater. And I said, well, Phil, I'm amazed that I thank you for the compliment, but frankly, what I'm doing here in the room with you is so much more groove in it. It's your music, and I'm playing so much more stuff. He said, no, man, I got to hear you hit the drums. I was like, yeah, but you're hearing me here. He's like, and this is a really insightful thing that I'll never forget. He said, Gary, here you're playing on electronic pads. I have no idea what you sound like. And I was like, yeah, but I'm playing my heart out. He's like, no, I have no idea how you sound on the drums. He wasn't impressed really with what I was doing, even though I was working so hard to impress him, playing all that stuff, in real time, drums and percussion. What he was impressed with was how the orchestra sounded and how the show landed and how it sounded in the house to him. Anyway, I was amazed. I was like, wow, he heard me play. Okay. Weeks go by, the 29-hour thing stops. And we're like, what's next for Tarzan? Well, the next thing I hear is that they're going to do another workshop, but they don't know who's going to play drums. I'm like, oh, man, I'm in trouble. And at the same time, Moving Out, the Billy Joel show, remember that show?
Yep.
Right? Was playing at the Richard Rodgers Theater. And the drummer, whose name I can never remember, who's Billy Joel's drummer now, amazing drummer, Chuck Berge.
Yeah.
Yes. Chuck Berge was playing drums. And Chuck Berge was freaking out because Move It Out got its closing notice. And he loved having a Broadway show. And Chuck Berge, he was like, we're closing? Well, what's coming in? Somebody said, well, it's actually Tarzan, Phil Collins. Chuck Berge had replaced Phil Collins on Brand X. So Chuck reputedly said, well, I'm going to call Phil and tell him I want the job. So, not to pat myself on the back, but here's how this went down, and I'm not kidding you. So this workshop of Tarzan's plan, I hear Chuck wants a job. I'm like, well, that's it. I'm done. And Paul Boguet said, well, I don't know. It's not over yet. And Phil Collins told them, say, look, I never heard Chuck play in a theater. The only guy I've ever heard play in a theater that I know I love the way he plays in the theater and what he plays, what he brings to the show from a theatrical point of view is Gary Seligson. I don't care who you put in the band, but I want that guy to play drums.
Wow, that's great.
I kid you not, that's how it went down. Luckily for me, because I felt like my head, I was really flattered and amazed, but at the same time I knew that Chuck is a great drummer, and I thought, oh man, Chuck's going to fucking kill me. But luckily he got the gig with Billy Joel a few weeks after that, so he's been happy ever since. So It was a win-win.
That's amazing.
Anyway, so I left Wicked to do that because Phil Collins is my hero. There's so much drumming going on. How could I, and I guess I was, at that point I had one kid, now I have two, and I was like, this will be okay, Tarzan, it's a Disney show. They thought it was going to be bigger than Lion King. They had really great hopes for it.
How long did it last?
It lasted for 14 months, 15 months. I probably worked for about a year and a half on it, maybe a little more. But it was the experience of a lifetime. But when that show closed, I had no shows, and I was stubbing for the next 14 months.
Did you go back to Wicked to sub?
Yes.
And what did it feel like?
Really weird, because I played it the way I played it, and Matt plays a little differently than me. I was like, and I asked the conductor, I was like,
can I play it my way?
Can I play? He's like, yeah, you wrote this thing. You just play it. And they were forgiving. They let me play it my way. And not that it's not different. Please. He just had, Matt is a great drummer. He has a heavier foot than me. He's coming from a little different place in some ways.
Man, I don't know who has a heavier foot than you, man. I heard you play, man. You can, it's funny how you have a history of playing jazz, but you play so heavily. I mean, you have a strong feel. whether it's Aida or
I like to play rock, I guess,
yeah, and then of course, I mean, we'll get to the School of Rock thing in a minute, and of course, playing Ain't Too Proud. But Tarzan, you went back to subbing after that closed, and
No, I had 14 months of subbing. I mean, I was doing a bunch of stuff, but I was subbing. And then one day I got called to do Billy Elliot, which was great. And that lasted for about 3.5 years, maybe longer.
oh, that's great.
It was amazing. And my second son was born at that point during that time. Yeah. And then when that closed, that was Elton John, and really interesting experience too. Very different.
Phil Collins and then Elton John. So tell me about Elton John.
It was Elton John, then Phil Collins, and then Elton John.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Ah.
What do you want to know?
So meeting people like Elton John and Phil Collins, were you self-conscious? Were you like thinking, oh my God, this is a legendary, rock star? Or were you like, oh, this guy's cool, let me just work with him? Like, how did you approach it?
Well, I wish I could say I was that cool as a cucumber like that, but not really. With Elton John, I got to play with him 2 times. One he showed up in the rehearsal room for Aida early on, and I got to play a shuffle fill with him because we had played it for Elton. He was watching, and he's like, not Gary. He was sat in the middle of the room, and then he started walking over to the bandstand. He said, actually, I think it should be a little faster. And then he kicked the piano player off the stool, basically. He said, can I sit down? And he played, a faster shuffle feel, and I played along with him. That was my strongest suit. That lasted for about 2 choruses. And it was incredible. He's a force of nature, and when he plays, but he plays he has such a giant feel, giant sense of pulse and groove that basically he'll take you along, man. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get in the way of this. So I was just playing some drums to his very strong piano feel. It's like, yeah, it should be this tempo, 20 points, 20 clicks faster. That was one time, and then another time on the Today Show. That was really wild. But I won't get into that. There's a whole story with that, but I will not get into that because it's a 10-minute story. But playing with him is amazing, and for that reason, he has such a strong time feel. Phil Collins, I never got to play with him where he was playing, except when he was tapping a pencil on a seriously, or clapping. But I got to play with him singing, and that was amazing. And I got to listen to him tapping time with a pencil on the desk, or his foot, tapping his foot. And I'm here to tell you that he has like the strongest sense of groove anybody I've ever met in my life. Like, he can tap his foot, Clayton. Like, here's a story. He was always, when we were rehearsing Tarzan, there's all this flying that goes around where they have to fly actors. And so it took months of rigging where the people are on harnesses, and Disney didn't want anybody to get hurt, of course. So we took months. And during the 10-week period, I didn't play a note, but I transcribed a lot of stuff. Yeah, not kidding you. Until the last day, and then even that day I barely played. But I would be in rehearsal. I would be hanging out in the room where they were teaching the vocals, and Phil was there basically every day for 10 weeks or whatever, 8 weeks, whatever it was. Always there. Phil Collins was there day in, day. He loved it. He comes from the theater. He was a child actor in London, and he loved the process. He was always there. He's the nicest guy. He's the mellowest guy you've ever met in your life. No airs about him. No ego. Incredible. Well, often Phil would be in the room where they were teaching vocal harmonies. So the guy would be playing piano and teaching parts, and Phil would just be there just to make sure people were not singing with too much vibrato, because he knew the music was not going to be about vibrato, even though it's a Broadway show, it's a pop show. He wanted to make sure nobody was learning it correctly. So he would just be tapping time either with his foot on the floor or his hand, just to kind of help the time in the room. Man, the whole room would be swaying. He was so strong, Clayton. His time feel is so strong. The air in the room felt differently when he would do that. He didn't try to do anything. He was just like listening and tapping his foot. But the groove, the pocket was so wide. Wow. Incredible.
Tell me more about Billy Elliot. I didn't get a chance to see it. I need to see the actual movie. Did you do the movie also?
No.
Okay.
Billy Elliot's an interesting story. That came to New York after it was already a hit in London. And when it came to New York, the album had already come out. They recorded it in London. And so my direction was to play what was already created. So I had I was just to play it as it was.
Okay.
It was, unlike Aida and Wicked, where there was a ton of Gary in those parts, there's hardly anything in the Broadway version. Not hardly anything. Not too much change for the Broadway version versus what was on the album. There's some new stuff. There's a tune called Electricity where I added a double kick drum pedal. I thought that worked really well. There was a few little things, and that was a big thing. Oh, that Electricity and the song Angry Dance at the end of the first act is like a boogie that I played a double kick drum for the last chorus. That was not in London's version. But the drummer that recorded the album in London was not the guy that played the show. The guy that recorded the album is a guy named Ralph Sammons, Salmins, a very famous London studio. He's like Steve Gadd. Amazing drummer. He sounded. I just was like, well, what you played is, beautiful. All the big band stuff is great. So it's a big band. There's a lot of brass chorales. There's a lot of military kind of stuff. There's a couple of rocky things with that boogie and some classic kind of Elton stuff, but not as classic, I'd say, as the Aida Elton.
That ran for 4 years, right? About
4 years, I think, something around there. Yeah, it was amazing. I loved it.
There was a Broadway cast recording, wasn't there?
No, only the London cast recording.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And it's great.
That's cool.
It's a great show. I mean, the story is amazing. They thought it would run longer. They put a tour together, and they thought the tour would do really well. But what happened on the tour was it's a story about a kid who in a coal mining town back in the 80s when the coal miners went on strike. And basically the whole town, everybody in the town works in the coal mines, and nobody has work. They're all on strike. Nobody's got any money. And one of the coal miners' sons is this 12 or 13-year-old kid who loves to dance. He's not gay, but so he became a ballet dancer, and he loves it. And the whole story ensues. I won't give it away, but basically what happened with that was the tour was put out. They were going to do 5 months in Chicago. Wound up running about 6 weeks. They couldn't sell tickets because Middle America thought that the show was Billy Elliot, a show about a little gay dancer.
Oh, really?
Seriously? And
wow.
They couldn't sell the tour because people were not interested in seeing an Elton John show about a gay ballet dancer. And basically,
wow,
they poured so much money into that. They lost so much money with the tour that they gave up on the Broadway run. Basically, is what happened. But they got 4 years of Broadway out of it. But that's really what happened.
If you like what you hear on the show, subscribe to the Broadway Drumming 101 newsletter at broadwaydrumming101.substack.com. That's Substack, substack.com. The Broadway Drumming 101 newsletter is your one-stop shop for everything you'll need to know about playing drums for Broadway musicals. When you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll learn about what it takes to be a successful pit musician with content delivered directly to your email inbox 2 to 3 times a week. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you'll have a backstage pass to the world of a Broadway drummer playing on a hit show. As a paying subscriber, you'll receive behind-the-scenes access to the life of a musician who makes a living on Broadway. You'll also be able to read every post, not just those occasional free ones. You'll get access to all newsletter issues in the archives and have an ability to participate in subscriber-only comments and events. If you become a founding member for a gift of only $75, you'll receive discounted private drum lessons, an opportunity to watch Clayton play in the pit of his show, and a 25% discount on future promotional products. If you'd like to make a direct contribution to the production of this show, you can reach us at Venmo at Clayton-Craddock, Cash App at Syncopated, that's CINCOPATED, or PayPal at Clayton Craddock. Any amount of support will be appreciated. Thank you for listening.
On to Motown the Musical. You played percussion there.
Yeah, so Billy Elliot closed, and then I had, again, 14 months of subbing, and I went back to whatever I could and subbed a lot and did a lot of different workshops and things. And then Motown happened because Ethan Pop, the musical supervisor for Motown, I met during Tarzan. He was the associate conductor on Tarzan. So he hired me to do one of the readings to play drums on, which was frightening for me, Berry Gordy in the room. And then eventually they got Buddy Williams, which I'm really happy about, to play drums. And Ethan said, well, I can offer you the percussion chair. I said, sure, I'll do that. And that's how that happened. So, yeah, it was percussion. Very similar to what I did on Dreamgirls. A lot of tambourine. You were there. You played the drum. A lot of timpani, a lot of tambourine, some vibes, some xylophone.
Yeah,
I had to dust off my mallet chops, and I did. I worked, for months playing scales and reading, getting my stuff back together, learning how the gospel tambourine thing.
Band was great, man. I used to love playing that show.
I know, and Roger Squatera was on playing the Jungle Book, and Roger.
Yes.
I love Roger Squatera. We were on Tarzan together. He was he and Javier Diaz it was me and Javier Diaz and Roger.
When I did the workshop of Ain't Too Proud, it was just me and Kenny Seymour for the most part doing, the choreography and the music. And then when we had the workshop, it was me, Keith Robinson, George Farmer, Roger, and Javier. And when I was playing with Roger and Javier, oh my God, I was playing what I was playing, but when they got together, their energy, they're so tight together. Yep. They just raised it up to a whole nother level. I'm like, shit.
Talk about Cloud 9, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. They're just, Cloud 9. Yeah. That groove at the very beginning. I'm like, oh my God.
Anything. I mean, those guys are, so imagine playing Phil Collins' music. No jungle vibe.
Oh my God. That's something.
Oh man, I mean that's why I took that gig. I mean it was like you raised off the floor. You're like levitating. The music was great.
Wow.
And those guys, the three of us, we had a ball. Amazing. Yeah, so fortunate to play with them. Amazing.
Motown closed, and you went on to School of Rock.
My timing was great. Ethan Pop was hot, and so School of Rock somehow fell in his lap, and he asked me if I wanted to play drums on that. We did the workshop and stuff for that, the pre-Broadway run, and School of Rock was 3 years, I guess, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I like that show. I took my kids there, and one of the guys actually went to middle school with my son, Matt, one of the guitar players. Can't remember his last name.
One of the kids in the band?
Yes.
In the on-stage band? That's awesome.
Yep. And it was fun watching those drummers. I remember you would tell me about one of the drummers at
Raghav. He's amazing.
Yes.
He's all over the internet. He's teaching at Drumeo.
Really?
Raghav is a beast. And the other guys were great too. Don't get me wrong. The other 13-year-old wunderkind drummers that were there, Levi and the original guy, can't think of his name right now.
Did they ever come down and
Raghav is a special. Drummers will learn about Raghav from now to the end of time. That's how special Raghav is.
Wow.
He's got his head screwed on straight. He's been practicing umpteen hours a day since he was a little kid, recording himself and videoing himself since the beginning. There's YouTube videos of him from like age 5 or 4 all the way. He's amazing. He's got giant ears. He's humble. He's smart. He's got the right aesthetic. He's all that. I'm a giant fan. I love that guy.
It's great.
Yes, everything good is with Raghav, man. Killed him.
One last thing, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yes, here we are.
Did that open up yet? I mean, did it actually open and then close? Or what was the?
We got 3 previews in.
3 previews in?
We did 3 previews, March 10, 11, and 12.
Oh my God, really?
For real. All right. Yeah, and I'm playing percussion there again. It's another Ethan Pop thing. So Ethan likes to hire me, I think, on percussion because if something happens to the drummer with a train or whatever, he knows he can slide me over.
That's true.
So I think for him, it's like, well, he got Gary, just in case. Or I think
is Rodney on that one? Rodney Howard?
Rodney Howard, he's great, killing it.
Yes, he is. Out of all the musicals that you've done, do you have a favorite musical that you played in, and why?
I guess it's hard to name a favorite, but I can tell you Aida has so much of me in it, and it was a thrilling time for me. It was really, really creative. That was a thrilling experience, but Tarzan, as you heard, is a thrilling experience. Wicked absolutely has a lot of me in it, too. That was thrilling, totally. Billy Elliot was great. I mean, I don't know. I love them all. Working next to Buddy Williams every night, honestly, his pocket and his time feel. I learned so much playing next to him every night.
Yeah,
it's studying for him too, but he really turned my head around in a great way. I love that guy.
What advice would you give to anyone interested in playing Broadway musicals?
Okay, well, I guess I have to preface it by saying Broadway musicals have changed in the last 15 years. A lot of them, even some, maybe one would say most of them, are on a click track now, so that's a skill that everybody has. But at the same time, you better know how to, if you want to play on Broadway, I think you better have the wherewithal to, if you're doing something and there's no click there, to know how to hold the band together and be able to listen to your fellow section mates. It's a little different, If there's no click there, then all of a sudden the stakes are higher, and so that's one element for sure. What advice would I give? As a percussionist, drummer, play as many different styles as you can, because you never know what. If you really want to play on Broadway, you never know what. Every show is a different pocket of. There's different styles. The difference between Rent and Jekyll and Hyde, or Rent and Tarzan, or Les Miserables, which I played for 5 years, is very orchestral. Miss Saigon, very like Asian-y orchestral. They're all different. So my advice would be to gain as much musical breadth as you can. More advice would be really pay attention to the conductor and understand that they're usually the only ones that can see the show from the front. So their responsibility, you have to have that in mind, I think, when you're sitting at the drum chair, even though you're driving the bus, and really maybe the ball's in your court in a way, because the drums supply a lot of heart and energy and momentum to the show. The person conducting, watching the show, playing keyboards, watching the show, has a singular, is the only one with that viewpoint of what's really going on. So if you're tuned out to the extent that you're not really aware of what the conductor has on his plate in real time, moment to moment. In other words, if you're not really in tune to him to some high degree, you're setting yourself up for potential disaster. I mean, things could be happening on stage. People could be stopping, and you could miss a vamp. That things can really go wrong. It's very much happening. It's conducted in real time. It's played in real time, whether there's a click track or not, man. It is being played. So you better pay attention to the conductor, and you need to have that skill and that awareness to be able to do that. So my advice to you is, if you're playing a show, know the show really well so that you can take your mind off the book, look at the conductor, be aware of what he or she is going through, and then listen and play the show. And keep in mind the action and the storytelling, because playing a Broadway show or playing a theatrical show is just that. It's not playing in a band with your band. It's a theatrical experience. It's a story being told. And you're a cog in the wheel of a story that's being told in real time. And because you're the drummer, you're supplying the heartbeat, the passion, the emotion, whether it's a triangle is quietly, beautiful triangle note, ting with the orchestra, or if you're throwing down, playing School of Rock with kids jamming on stage in a rock, it's all of the above. There's my answer.
What are some things that...
Be on time, that's another one.
Oh, yeah, well, here we go. I got other questions. What are things that a Broadway drummer should never do in a Broadway pit?
Should never do? If you're subbing for someone, be aware of what the environment is when you get into the drummer's space. And if you need to alter it, first of all, don't alter it much, meaning snare drum angle. And if you have to change the seat height, try to get it back to where it was. Because there's nothing worse than if I get delayed on the train or I'm running in and I get there and the first tune is a big tune. And if I sit down, it's like, wait, I feel that's not cool. It's also not cool to leave your coffee cup, Coke can, newspapers. Don't leave it a mess, man. Don't leave it a mess. Go back to the area. Go back to how you found it. Basically, have respect for the environment.
What are things that a drummer should always do playing Broadway shows?
Be aware of just what I said before, that it's a theatrical experience. You have to know the show well enough to keep your eyes on the conductor almost at all times. You have to realize that it's not about you. It's about the cohesiveness of the theatrical experience. You're in charge of the rhythm section, maybe not in charge, but you're there to help make that happen. Be always aware of that. Have your antenna way out, way open.
What kind of drums do you use? And sticks, cymbals, heads?
I'm a Pearl endorser for a long time now.
Now, why Pearl and not Sonar or Yamaha or
that's a good question.
DW?
To be honest with you, I had a Slingerland endorsement, and Slingerland for a few years there was owned by Gibson, and then Gibson kind of dropped Slingerland. And so when Aida was happening, I knew I needed a drum set. I knew I could use Elton John's clout to get an endorsement. And Slingerland could not furnish a drum set for me in New York at that point because Gibson had kind of dropped the ball and wasn't interested. So, and I was already with ProMark drumsticks. And my rep at ProMark said, you need drums, man. I know everybody. What do you want? Pearl, Yamaha? I was like, well, Pearl would be great. And he basically said, okay, let me call XYZ, and you call him. And that's how it worked. Elton John and Disney and a Broadway show looming was enough for Pearl to say, yes, great. And you teach too? Great, yes.
Did they give you a set or they...
They gave me a set no, not for free. No. The set that I used we bought it, at artist cost. Disney bought that drum set. Then I bought a drum set that I had for myself. I wish I could have kept that Aida drum set because it was great. I loved it.
Is that what you have in your studio now, a Pearl
drum set? No, now I have Billy Elliott's. I have a bunch of different drums, but the set here now is a Pearl reference series that I used on Billy Elliott that I bought from Billy Elliott.
And the drums that I saw you play in School of Rock, they were Pearl also, correct?
Yeah, and School of Rock producers wanted to keep that drum kit, which I'm bummed about because I loved it.
What do they do with it?
I don't know. The producers have it. It's in a warehouse somewhere collecting dust. I don't know.
Cymbals too?
No, those are my cymbals. I kept my cymbals.
And what kind do you use?
Sabian. I love Sabian. I've been with Sabian for a long time.
A lot of my colleagues like Sabian cymbals.
I really do love Sabian.
I don't know.
So much variety, and I've never, ever run into a situation where I wished I had something that I didn't have.
Wow.
They were really nice to me through the year. They've been great. I love that company. Last
time we spoke, you were working on a show that, it wasn't a show, it was a, 4-show thing on Broadway. I forgot what it's called, Disney on Broadway.
Yeah, we just did a really exciting thing. That's one of the most exciting things that I have going on in my life the last 10 years is I get to play. They've called it different things over the years. It's when we just did the first equity union contract show on Broadway since the pandemic closed it down. We did 5 shows or 6 maybe at the New Amsterdam Theater called Disney on Broadway, where it's 4 great singers, the original Mary Poppins, the original Tarzan. It's Ashley Brown, Josh Strickland. In this case, it was Michael Scott, who was the Aladdin, the current Aladdin, and Kissy Simmons, who was a Nala and Lion King for a long time. So it's 4 amazing singers, and we basically play various repertoire from the Disney on Broadway songbook. So any of those shows. So we did stuff from Hercules, which is a new show that's happening. We did stuff from The Lion King. which was their first show, then stuff from Aida, then we did Aladdin, we did Frozen, various hits sung really well with new arrangements and a 5-piece band on stage. And I've got to do a version of that with orchestra. We did it with the orchestra, Chicago Symphony, Pops, the Boston Pops, where it's the 4 singers, a pianist, and me with the orchestra Pops. It's been amazing. I love that. And then we also do like the cruise line shows sometimes. The 4 of us will go out. The singers will go out with a small band, and we do that. It's amazing.
You played with AC/DC?
No, not well. I worked never, but I worked with the singer Brian Johnson. Is the singer with AC/DC,
yes.
10 years or so. Brian Johnson, believe it or not, was involved in writing the book and writing the music for that show. So it's a rock show, and we did a performance of it down at a club in the Village. Eden Espinosa was in it, and they had a cast. We did like 2 performances maybe, and I got to play with him because he sang. He sang,
wow.
man. He sang on one tune. That was amazing. Cool. It was wild. Wild. Now,
I thought you got it, I thought you took Phil.
No. He didn't take. Brian Johnson did not take me on the road. I never played with AC/DC. I got to play in a concert in New York with him where Brian Johnson sang 2 of his own tunes and I was playing drums. Yes.
That's cool.
It was great.
I have one last question for you. For anyone that wants to find out more about you, where can they find you? Social media, website?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I don't pay attention too much. I don't usually post things. I should. I'm on Facebook. My name there is good. I have my website. My website is outdated. One of the things I plan on doing is getting it together before we start work again in a couple of months. It's outdated, but I'll update it. People can find me there. Gary at GarySeligson.com. They can email me.
You teach lessons?
Yeah. Here and there I do, yes, when I can. I love it. I love to teach.
The next thing you're doing is Mrs. Doubtfire. When is that going to be starting?
Doubtfire, we start rehearsals, I think, for me in mid-October. And then we open December 5.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's very interesting to learn the backstories of things and why you went from certain shows to certain. I didn't know before you got to Broadway you had done so much touring. That's amazing.
I did, yeah. And usually what they say about people that go on a Broadway tour is that, well, you become a touring musician and you're stuck there. In my case...
Is that the case? Do you think that's the case nowadays?
It could happen. I don't know about nowadays. I feel like everything's shifted with COVID and things are really wide open now. There's a lot of different things happening, like there's feel like Broadway's changing for a lot of reasons, the whole equity amongst, it's just changing, people, it's changing.
Yes, it is.
So,
many ways. We'll see what happens when we come back.
Yeah, man. But I love touring. It worked out well for me. I feel like I got very lucky. Right place, right time, but right skill set.
Yes.
I think, Gary Chester, when he asked me if I wanted to play on Broadway, I think he knew that I might have the right personality for it and the right background for it, which is why he asked me.
I'm not sure. I don't really know. Is he still around?
No, he passed away about 15 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But, it dawned on me about 3 years into all the touring. I was like, man, you know what? I'm doing this day in and day out. But if I look back at who I am as a musician and like what my schooling was, I'm really doing the right gig because I come from the classical world. I played a lot of drum set, and there's a lot of that, and I played with a lot of orchestras, and this is a good fit for me. So I feel like I got lucky. It wasn't my go-to. If you were to ask me in music school what my hope and dream would have been, it would have been to be a studio musician or maybe a timpanist in an orchestra.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, but the cards didn't. When I started studying with Gary Chester, and he said, "You want to play percussion or drums?" Then I became more of a drummer, and then I think it was kind of pushed in that direction. But I wound up doing everything. I'm playing percussion now, so very lucky, very fortunate, very grateful.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining me on the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast, and nice talking to you. And we will see each other in person.
Yeah, man, I can't wait.
Sooner than later.
Thanks, Clayton. I really appreciate it.